Hi guys, today our topic is about Chinese University EFL teachers' belief and practice of classroom writing assessments. The presenters are Haiyu Guo and Xin Tongzhang. Okay, let's begin. Here is the outline. Two parts are included. The presenters of the first part is Haiyu. Another part is presented by Xi Tong. Let's move on to the introduction. There are several parts. Here is the background. The classroom assessment is the tool for teachers to evaluate student performance. Over the last decade, assessment has been advocated from an assessment of learning (AOL) to an assessment for learning (AFL). However, currently, assessment for learning is in the second role in the writing assessments. Experts suggest that writing assessments should be reformed for improving student learning, understanding incongruence between belief and practice, and contributing factors are important for assessment reforms. In terms of the literature review, firstly, the previous study always focused on primary and secondary school instead of universities. Also, some study reviews the incongruence and congruence of teachers' belief and practice in writing assessment in China in terms of feedback, which is one component of AFL. However, AFL is a unitary concept that should cover wider conceptual factors. Some researchers found out teacher belief and practice in writing assessment are affected by multi-level factors. However, they omitted the role of belief, which has been considered as a mediated force for assessment reforms. Next, the majority of previous studies apply qualitative approaches to find out contributing factors. However, quantitative approach can establish general patterns about relationship among factors, assessment belief and practice. Hence, it was conducted this research to fill these gaps. Here is the research question. Firstly, to find out to what extent the EFL teachers' belief and their self-perceived practice are congruent in writing assessment. Secondly, to analyze the contributing factors that result in inconsistency. For the significance, this research gives us a better understanding of the process of integrated AFL into EFL writing instruction. Secondly, it can demonstrate the feasibility of using AFL in writing assessments. Also, it can provide a direction for future study. The next section is methodology. Okay, let's move on to the participants' information and type of data. This research was conducted by questionnaires and interviews. Correspondingly, the type of data mixed with quantitative and qualitative data. In the questionnaires, 136 EFL writing teachers were selected from 8 universities in China. In the interview, 10 EFL writing teachers were selected from previous participants based on the criteria of relevance, accessibility, and diversity. The quantitative instruments include a website-based questionnaires, Chromebook Alpha for checking reliability, SPF 25, and ANOVA for analyzing data. In terms of the procedures, this study adapted other questionnaires, which cover 3 subscales, 2 from AFL dimensions and the other one from AOL dimensions. Also, it applied Likert scaling for rating. Secondly, actual experts were invited to examine and pilot the questionnaires for suitability and validity. After, the website-based survey were administered to 8 universities. After the questionnaires were completed on website. As for the qualitative instruments, it includes semi-structured one-on-one interviews, audio tape, and artifacts such as PowerPoint to triangulate data. For the qualitative procedures, firstly, research selected interviewee based on diverse lengths of teaching experience and assessment training backgrounds. Secondly, they choose the contents of the interview related to their belief and practice. The interview were recorded and conducted. Finally, researchers collect other artifacts to triangulate interview data. Let's move on to the analysis of quantitative data. To answer the first question, 2 repeat measure ANOVAs were performed. To answer the second question, researchers used process to examine 6 moderation effects. Also, mixed ANOVA with post-hold testing. Researchers found the impact of teaching experience and pre or in-service training. Next, the first step of qualitative analysis is to transcribe the audio tab. Then the first and second cycle coding were used. The coding was checked by another coder. Also, other materials such as assessment policy are collected. As for the result of analysis, 4 parts are included. The first part is descriptive data result. According to the chat, Chinese University EFL teachers in this survey perceived that AFL practice was significantly more important than AOL practice of performance orientation. However, teachers' self-perceived practice were different, since their belief with performance orientation is more regularly practiced than other else. This part is moderation effect of teaching experience. As we can see, with the teaching experience increased, the simple slope tends to be gentle, which means the effect of AFL belief on AFL practice decrease. In other words, teachers with more experience in this current study tend to have a lower alignment between assessment belief and practice. The third is the impact of in or pre-service training on practice. For the in-service training, in the left-hand side of the slide, the frequency of practice among 3 assessment types differs between 2 groups, while the dimension of promoting learner autonomy is the lowest in both groups. Teachers with in-service training use this dimension more frequently than the other group. Teachers without in-service training imply the dimension of performance orientation most frequently, whereas teachers with in-service training apply the dimension of making learner explicit most frequently. For pre-service training, no significant impact on assessment practice was found, since the trend is same. The final part is a qualitative result about contributing factors. As the table shows in the micro level, insufficient language assessment training for teachers and their perception of students related to student motivation and proficiency level lead to hinder them in using AFL practice. At the meso level, due to the work constraints and heavy workload, teachers wavered between AFL strategies and conventional approaches. At the micro level, the public English test is considered as one of the main contributing factors. That's all my part. In the next part, I will invite Xitong to present.
Thanks to Haiyu for sharing. I will spend 7 minutes introducing discussion, conclusion, pedagogical implication, limitation, future directions, and critique. Let's see findings from first research question. Chinese University EFL teachers' writing assessment practices were not always aligned with their beliefs that EFL was more important than AOL in providing student opportunities to learn English writing. Practices in the dimension of making learning explicit generally match beliefs in terms of the establishment of a supportive learning atmosphere and assessment criteria clarification in the field-up stage, but mismatches were found regarding the form of feedback. These findings differed from previous studies on school teachers, where most of them in UK found that EFL practices relate to making learning explicit to be a viable challenge. Furthermore, mismatch between beliefs and practice was more salient between the dimensions of promoting learning autonomy and performance orientation. The same findings you could see here. Teachers still took a dominant role in assessing writing and monitoring students' learning, despite their belief that cultivating students' agency and metacognition benefit learning in writing. Let's move on to second research question. It shows at micro level, teachers lack language assessment training to equip them with writing assessment literacy to translate AFL beliefs into action. Despite previous literature shows language teachers' beliefs were informed by teacher education, this research found teachers who received pro-service assessment training report no significant difference in teachers' beliefs or practices. This influence of pro-service training could result from insufficient EFL content in language assessment course or trainee teachers' lack of experience to transform what they learned into practice. In comparison, teachers who had in-service assessment training used significantly more EFL practices of promoting learning autonomy, unlike AOI practices of performance evaluation, which echoed the beneficial impact of continuous professional development in England. Combined with previous research findings, you could see the Figure 5. It shows when students perceived their teacher did not support their autonomy in EFR writing, they would become demotivated towards writing, which in turn decreased teachers' motivation in using EFI. Teachers with more teaching experience in the research report wide mismatch between beliefs and practice regarding EFI dimensions of making learning explicit and promoting learning autonomy. In the words of Phipps and Borg, peripheral beliefs which were theoretically embraced, but would not be held with the same level of conviction. That is the end of the discussion. Let's look at the conclusion together. First, Chinese EFL teachers in the current survey had incongruence between classroom writing assessment, beliefs, and practice. EFL practice in the dimensions of making learning explicit and promoting learning autonomy were perceived to be more important than AOI practice of performance evaluation. However, the reverse was found in the teacher's self-perceived practice, with AOI being more regularly practiced than EFL approaches. Second, multi-level contextual factors were found to hinder teachers from acting in accordance with assessment beliefs. Teachers' first-hand experience of assessment practice could turn AFL beliefs into peripheral beliefs, theoretically espouse ideals that will not be implemented. That's the end of conclusion. Next slide will show the pedagogical implication. Pedagogically, this research gives insight on teacher education's future directions. First, quality initial and continuous professional development is needed to help teachers implement EFL practice. Second, to alleviate the detrimental impact from meso-level, professional learning communities need to be fostered. Third, although examination-driven system cannot be easily changed, it is pivotal to cultivate awareness that multiple drafting process writing could also be used to prepare for interpretive writing in public examination. Next slide will show the limitation. There are two limitations of this story have to be noted. First, purposeful sampling may compromise the representativeness of the sample and thus lower the generalizability of the survey results. Second, the questionnaire reports teachers' perceived frequency of assessment practice, which may not be totally congruent with the actual classroom practice. Let's see future directions together. First, collect data regarding students' actual assessment beliefs and practice to examine the consistency between student and teacher perspectives. Second, longitudinal research on the relation between multi-level factors and the changes in teachers' assessment beliefs and practice. Let's move on to the critique. This is the last part, critique. There are some advantages. First, questionnaire review by experts and teachers. Second, collect artifacts for triangulation. Third, 3 levels for reasons of practice belief gaps. The first advantage is disproportionate ratio of university type and teacher gender. Second, is only 3 teachers have training experience. Here is references list. So that's all the presentation. Thanks to my partner Haiyu, and thanks you for your watching. This is discussion question.